Although the United States identifies China as its primary strategic competitor and Beijing views Washington as the single greatest obstacle to its rise. A profound paradox lies at the heart of their relationship. Despite a barrage of tariffs, economic sanctions, and tight technology restrictions, bilateral trade flows remain exceptionally resilient. U.S. imports from China in 2025 exceeded $308 billion, pushing total two-way trade close to the $415 billion mark. Furthermore, mainland Chinese investors manage roughly $1.279 trillion in U.S. securities. This mutual interdependence is vividly illustrated by a tug-of-war over critical resources and technology. While the U.S. holds the upper hand in key segments of modern semiconductors, China maintains absolute dominance in processing 19 of the 20 core global minerals, holding an average market share nearing 70%. Both powers actively seek to neutralize each other's leverage. Yet, ironically, the existence of each economy remains deeply intertwined with the resources and markets of the other. Looking back at history, the link between these two superpowers was never forged on trust or shared ideological values. After 1949, both nations endured decades of frozen relations on opposing sides of the Cold War. A turning point arrived in the early 1970s when Washington reached out to Beijing, culminating in the formal establishment of diplomatic ties on January 1, 1979. This breakthrough was driven entirely by pragmatic, strategic calculations. The U.S. needed a counterweight against the Soviet Union, while China sought to break out of its isolation to attract capital, know-how, and market access from the West. This engagement entered an era of explosive growth when China joined the World Trade Organization (WTO) in 2001 as its 143rd member. Opening its economy triggered to opposing strategic wagers, Washington's calculation, believing that integrating China into the global trading system would compel Beijing to adhere to existing rules and gradually reform along Western lines. Beijing's goal: maximizing international resources, capital, and technology to modernize the country while fully preserving its distinctive political model. The tangible results revealed a stark disparity in benefits gained. The U.S. gained access to inexpensive consumer goods, optimized corporate profit margins, and tapped into a vast market. However, China harvested far greater strategic dividends. It successfully built an unmatched industrial infrastructure, accumulated vast foreign exchange reserves, and mastered global supply chains, an achievement no other nation could replicate within the same timeframe over 2 decades later. American leadership awoke to a bitter reality. Beijing did not settle for mere integration into the global order. It emerged as a power capable of rewriting the rules of the system itself. Washington did not just witness the rise of a rival, it actively helped nurture a partner, only to now face intense competition from that very partner, viewing the U.S.-China clash purely through trade deficit figures captures only the tip of the iceberg. Money and commodities can be negotiated, but what these two superpowers are vying for does not belong on a commercial trade table. At stake are regional dominance, national security, technological superiority, and above all, the authority to dictate global rules. In the Indo-Pacific, Washington consistently strives to maintain a balance of power to prevent any single nation from dominating the region. However, Beijing views the heavy U.S. military presence and alliance system right on its doorstep as the primary impediment to its ambition of national rejuvenation. This contradiction is nearly irreconcilable. What the U.S. frames as preserving stability and balance, China views as a strategy of containment and encirclement. Conversely, Beijing's drive to reclaim its rightful standing is assessed by Washington as an act to dismantle the status quo. These fundamentally opposed perspectives leave little common ground. This friction is most acutely visible in Taiwan, a flashpoint that has persisted since normalizations in 1979, the U.S. passage of the Taiwan Relations Act and its ongoing supply of defensive arms remain a constant thorn in Beijing's side. The Taiwan issue far transcends a standard territorial dispute, as the island sits at the convergence of four critical strategic vectors: politics and legitimacy, deeply tied to the political legitimacy of the Beijing government; security commitments, a testing ground for U.S. credibility toward its alliance network in Asia; geoeconomics, positioned along vital maritime choke points in the Western Pacific; core technology, the world's indispensable hub for advanced semiconductor manufacturing. Any shift regarding Taiwan triggers immediate confrontation across all four fronts simultaneously. Nonetheless, the most fiercely contested battle is unfolding quietly in the high-tech arena, the semiconductor war. Advanced microprocessors, artificial intelligence (AI), and chip manufacturing equipment have evolved far beyond standard commercial goods. They serve as the foundational pillars determining economic power, intelligence capabilities, and military dominance in the 21st century. Whichever nation masters these core technologies gains decisive leverage across all other domains. For this reason, Washington has launched a continuous stream of sanctions and export controls targeting high-performance processors, high-bandwidth memory, and lithography equipment. The ultimate U.S. objective is to halt China's momentum in strategic tech sectors. Ultimately, underlying every military, geopolitical, and technological dispute is a clash over world order. While the United States remains determined to defend a global system in which it and its allies hold a dominant role, China is actively seeking to reshape that system to serve its own interests. Beijing's core ambition is to expand its comprehensive influence over global rules of engagement spanning technology, finance, trade, and security. This ambition ensures that the U.S.-China confrontation cannot be resolved through a conventional agreement. Tariff adjustments or commitments to purchase more goods are merely temporary fixes. Two superpowers cannot share the top position in the exact same strategic space. This is a structural conflict that no signed treaty can settle. Despite deep and seemingly irreconcilable conflicts, the two sides have yet to completely sever ties. The reason lies in a mutual interdependence that resembles an invisible pair of handcuffs, with each country holding one half of the key. Layer 1. China's manufacturing network. The U.S. relies heavily on the industrial capacity of the world's second-largest economy, eventually into roughly $308.4 billion in 2025. The flow of electronics, components, and equipment continues to pour into the American market. China's strength no longer rests on cheap labor, but on a fully integrated manufacturing ecosystem, tightly grouped supply chains, large-scale transport infrastructure, an abundant pool of engineers, and the ability to scale up at hyperspeed. Relocating a single factory may take a few years, but rebuilding an entire, supporting ecosystem presents a monumental challenge. Layer 2. U.S. market and finance. Conversely, China still needs the massive purchasing power of American consumers to maintain growth momentum for its export sectors. On the financial front, the ties are even tighter. As of mid-2025, investors from mainland China still managed approximately $1.279 trillion in U.S. securities. This demonstrates that despite Beijing's continuous push for a de-risking strategy, the U.S. financial system remains a safe haven, asset store for which they have yet to find a comparable alternative. Layer 3. Washington's tech bottlenecks. The U.S. holds the upper hand thanks to its control over core technologies. Through licensing mechanisms and export barriers, the U.S. can restrict China's access to advanced processors, design software, and semiconductor manufacturing equipment. This is a vulnerability that Beijing, despite pouring immense resources into investment, cannot achieve self-sufficiency in over the short term. Layer 4. Beijing's mineral supply. In response, China holds a strategic wildcard in raw materials. Data from the International Energy Agency (IEA) indicates that China currently dominates the refining stage of 19 out of 20 essential minerals worldwide, accounting for an average of about 70% of the global market share. The majority of these refined materials play a pivotal role in the supply chains for electric vehicle batteries, energy infrastructure, high-grade magnetic materials, and the defense sector. Despite possessing world-class microchip design capabilities, the US still faces the risk of modern production lines grinding to a halt without a supply of processed minerals. Looking at the broader picture, this interconnectedness is distinctly asymmetric. The US holds strengths in foundational technology, financial scale, and alliance networks. Meanwhile, China commands the manufacturing process, industrial scale, and raw material processing capacity. Neither nation exercises complete dominance over the entire value chain, but each holds key links that the other cannot immediately replace. This is the root of the current stalemate, an interdependence that forces both sides to exercise restraint, as any damaging blow delivered will inevitably bounce back and harm the initiator. Surface-level statistical data points to signs of a shift. The market share of Chinese goods in direct US imports dropped from around 21% in 2017 to approximately 13% in 2024. Countries like Vietnam or Mexico are filling this void. Nevertheless, trade flows have not truly vanished. They have merely rerouted, even as final assembly processes relocate to Southeast Asia or Latin America. Many new factories continue to operate using machinery, components, and capital from China. A report from the International Monetary Fund (IMF) notes that intermediary countries serve not only as transshipment hubs, but also as locations where Chinese enterprises restructure and expand their production networks. The origin label on a product may change, but the underlying added value from China remains. The US has reduced its direct dependency, but indirect links persist in a new form. A complete decoupling is an unlikely scenario due to the exorbitant costs involved. To achieve total separation, the world would have to construct two parallel systems for semiconductors, minerals, technical standards, and logistics infrastructure. The IMF warns that such a deep fragmentation scenario could reduce global GDP by up to 7% in the long run. Loss severe enough to set back the world economy in a context where both full reconciliation and total divorce are impractical. The two superpowers are heading toward a state of managed dependence through a strategy of selective decoupling, core security sector tightening, and isolation. Encompasses artificial intelligence, advanced semiconductors, defense technology, telecommunications infrastructure, strategic minerals, quantum computing, and sensitive investment flows. Barriers will continue to be erected here. Civilian trade sector sustaining commerce encompasses consumer goods, general industrial products, and routine commercial services. Business activities in this group will proceed as usual to maintain economic benefits. The shared objective of both Washington and Beijing is not to extinguish the relationship entirely, but to build resilience and avoid having their economies neutralized by a single bottleneck when risks arise. For that reason, Washington has proactively diversified its supply sources and shifted production chains to friendly nations. Conversely, Beijing is striving to master core technologies, stockpile strategic resources, expand consumer markets outside the US, and gradually diminish its reliance on the Western financial system. However, the greatest risk lies in this very dynamic, although economic entanglements make the cost of conflict more prohibitive than ever. They have never served as a guaranteed shield against war breaking out. History proves that nations do not always make decisions based on rational economic calculations. A war can easily be triggered if one side believes its opponent is weakening, an opportunity to strike is slipping away, or that the adversary will not dare to retaliate due to commercial ties. At that point, the network of dependence that once acted as a safety fuse instantly transforms into a tool for political coercion. Bilateral trade continues. But every shipping container, every line of microchips, or every canastrige quant ile, be ene chisanti, ene anteo, kong ng, papu, ponkachan, emiken English, ph, pv, itintech, nv, inoi video pech, enetixo. What keeps these two heavily friction-ridden superpowers together despite their intense confrontation? The answer lies in three factors: scale, specialization, and switching costs. 1. In terms of scale, as the world's two leading economies, completely removing either from global supply chains is impossible, as it would trigger the collapse of the entire global economy. 2. In terms of specialization, the US holds an absolute advantage in cutting-edge technology, financial systems, and international alliances. Meanwhile, China holds a near monopoly on industrial manufacturing capacity, raw material refining, and large-scale supply chains. Both hold vital choke per in their inching costs. Completely severing bilateral ties would require decades and trillions of dollars in investments. Along with the risks of skyrocketing inflation and economic recession, achieving independence from one another is far more expensive than maintaining this bond. Current reality shows that the US-China relationship is no longer a matter of cooperative development as it was in the early 21st century, nor has it fallen into the total isolation of the Cold War era. They coexist in a new historical dynamic: fierce technological competition, intense security confrontation, and trade coercion. Yet, still forced to engage in daily trade to sustain their domestic economies, these two superpowers maintain ties not out of trust, but because the losses from a breakup far exceed the price of confrontation. Therefore, the key question of our era is not whether the two sides will decouple, but whether they possess the composure to de-escalate flashpoints in a controlled manner, avoiding an accidental trigger for a global crisis. Thank you all for watching. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. I'm Mr. Khổng, thank you, and I'll see you in the next videos.